Okay, we'll go ahead and get started this evening. Okay, I'd like to call to order the October 17th, 2022 regular board meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. If you could all please rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone who's here with us this evening, as well as those of you who are joining online or viewing from home. And I'd like to announce the board held an executive session October 3rd regarding personnel, negotiations, real estate, and school safety. Board members with an agenda before you, are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, then I'll go ahead and call on our board secretary for a roll call of board members present.
Dr. Bader. Here. Ms. Brandt.
Here.
Dr. Buck. Here. Ms. Concepcion.
Here.
Dr. Crevecoeur.
Here.
Dr. Duffy.
Here.
Ms. Huff.
Here.
Ms. Zidney.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Before we begin with the superintendent's update, I would like to recognize Mr. Johnson for a recent honor he received. Penn State's College of Education Alumni Society has selected Mr. Johnson for the 2022 Leadership and Service Award. This award is given to a graduate who has distinguished themselves in their chosen profession, whether in or out of the field of education, and who has demonstrated leadership and service within a career and/or to a community. Mr. Johnson's strong values and commitment to education, high standards of performance, and continued scholarly and service work are just a few attributes that qualified him for this award. Being nominated and selected for this honor marks him as an individual with an extraordinary record of accomplishment. The board would like to thank Mr. Johnson and congratulate him on this astounding achievement. So thank you. Congratulations.
I appreciate that.
Thanks, and I will turn it over to you for the superintendent update then.
All righty. I have a couple updates here. First, I would like to congratulate State High boys golf coach Greg Wilson. Greg was recently named by the 2021 National Federation of State High School Association Coaches Association as the Pennsylvania Boys Golf Coach of the Year for his role helping the Little Lions win their first state title of the last year. Way to go, Greg. Next, today we emailed school climate surveys to parents and guardians as well as employees. The surveys are open through October 31st. The surveys are completely anonymous and should take less than 5 minutes to complete. Students are taking surveys tailored to their levels during school. If you received a survey, please take the time to reply and help us become a better school district. We will use the feedback to work toward continuously improving and fulfilling our mission to prepare students for lifelong success. And thank you for sharing your feedback. On another note, the public is invited to an upcoming information session regarding the proposed physical plant building design. The session will be on October 25th at 6 p.m. here at Panorama Village Administrative Center Boardroom. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Jackie, do you have any legislative matters to report?
There's not much to report, but I did want to say that last week we were honored to have Scott Conklin at Delta, where he completed a presser for the no student should go hungry universal schools meal legislation.
Yeah.
In addition, just a small note that there are going to be hearings in the House and the Senate over the next 2 weeks concerning student data privacy. Student data privacy.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, COG report, Peter and Gretchen?
I have 5 items. What about you? 0. Okay. So then I will go ahead and give the COG report. So the first item is about the Whitehall Road Park, which is going to open hopefully in the spring of 2024. And there was a meeting about the fact that there is some more money that's needed, so it's about $625,000, and they are going to have to sort of move some money around from contingency, and then also they need money from a grant match and irrigation, and for fields 3 and 4. So that's a total of $625,000. It was recommended that that be considered by the Finance Committee, and that is where that's at right now. So, but there, I know a lot of people have want that park, and so I did want to mention that during the planning of the park, there were many, many rectangular field folks who came out to support the project. And I was sort of asking the Parks Authority, or CRPR Director, Pam Salakongas, about that, and she said, well, yeah, but a lot of those kids from those families have aged out. And so those families that were so active back then are not necessarily so active right now. And there's a lot of fundraising that's needed. So for any families out there who whose kids are going to benefit from these new rectangular fields at this park, any type of fundraising that they might be thinking about is definitely a great idea. So I just thought I would mention that. And then the second item is a quick one from the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee at the COG. I just wanted to give a heads up that in February, a trash refuse recycling survey will go out to our community. And it's coming. It's not here yet. It's not till February. But when that is out, that would be great if everybody could respond to that survey. And then also, I attended a public safety meeting for the COG, and I wanted to mention that it was interesting, it was sort of an interesting theme throughout the week in these COG meetings that I attended, that financially things are just different now because of inflation, and also because of supply chain issues. And so, for example, in the public safety meeting, we learned that it's about a 30-month lead time for any ongoing replacement of like a wood chipper or a truck or anything that a local government or school district would need. And so that is a long time. So anything that needs to be purchased like that has that long lead time, we meaning local government and citizens and people who live here, would want to do that now, so because it takes so long to get it, and it has to be paid for up front. And so there's many items that will need to be paid for now that we actually won't see for quite some time. And this is just the nature of how things are right now. So that was both mentioned in the public safety meeting. Orders are not even, I just thought this, just so people are aware, I was not aware of this. Orders are not even being taken for ambulances right now, so you can't even order one. You can't be put on a wait list. And so that was sort of cause of concern to me that, wow, I mean, there's a certain life cycle of an ambulance, and that cycle is definitely being affected right now because you cannot even put yourself on a wait list. Police cars are, quote, impossible to purchase. So it's just, it's a really interesting time right now. So that was the public safety meeting. And then I also attended the Lucy meeting for the COG, Land Use and Community Infrastructure. And it was a joint meeting with the Planning Commission. What I wanted to share is that there has been a 2-year outreach program for the State College Area Connector on the bypass, and they're down to 3 alternatives. And there will be 2 meetings this week for public outreach at Mount Nittany Middle School, which is right across the parking lot from us right now. And those dates are, I have them written down here, the 19th and 20th. from 5 to 8:30, and there will be a presentation about the three alternatives at 6:15. So that is an opportunity for public input for that infrastructure project. And then the last thing that I wanted to share with you all is that I attended, they've been doing the budget at the COG. And mostly I wanted to share that the inflation, how that's affecting local budgets and local government, and also that, for example, Joe Viglione, who's the finance director for the COG, he was talking about, for example, budget estimates even from just 1 year ago, that they're no longer accurate. And this is a quote that I wrote down. He said, "You can throw those numbers out the window." So, for example, I think I reported back to you all a few months ago about CRPR doing a food truck for the pools in the summers. And that truck, had it been purchased in June, versus now, the inflation has put the price up by 3.4% from June to today, just from June to now. So, but apparently the good news, you can buy a food truck. You cannot buy a police car or an ambulance, but you can buy a food truck. So, so that will likely, they talked about that for a long time at the budget meeting, but that will probably happen. But I just thought I would share that example because I know that obviously the same thing is happening for SCASD. So that is everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Gretchen. Board members, anything else for communications? Okay. So then at this time, we have public comment. Each individual is allotted up to 3 minutes for items related to board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. For action items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item as required by school code. If additional time is necessary, the board might consider reopening public comment after board business is completed or during the next meeting. As a reminder, public comment is a chance for community members to share their thoughts with the board. It's not a time for the board to necessarily answer questions or engage in conversations. And you can always email the board at all-board@scasd.org. So if you'd like to make a public comment, come on up to the podium, and if you could introduce yourself and your relationship to the district, then you'll have 3 minutes. So thank
Great,
you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Mark Kissling. I live in State College. I'm the father of 2 children at Radio Park Elementary, including my son, Ollie, who's in 4th grade. Ollie may or may not get up and offer a public comment about how we need electric buses in our school district. We'll see. So I wanted to speak as a concerned community member and parent about the event that Penn State is allowing next Monday. So speakers with a long record of hateful and violence-inducing rhetoric are going to be here on campus, and I think probably all of you are aware of that. Mindful of that, I want to ask the board and the district, how is the district addressing the event, both in terms of public safety, but also in supporting teachers and helping students to make sense of what's going on in our community and the implications. And then the second question I want to raise to the board, and I understand public comment is not necessarily a time for dialogue. What policies are in place such that this situation couldn't play out within the district? So what we're seeing on campus, such that the district could say, no, this speaker or speakers with a history of such hateful and discriminatory rhetoric could be held away from, holding a gathering or some kind of event on campus. So thank you for hearing my questions.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I don't have answers to those off the top, but we can be in touch for sure. Thank you. Okay, I see we have an attendee here in the audience. Joshua Inwood, I see your hand raised. If you would like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, then you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Hopefully y'all can hear me.
We can hear you, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, great. So my name is Josh Inwood, and I have a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 9-year-old, and I'm also a professor at Penn State. And similar to the last comments, I just wanted to encourage the board and the school district to be proactive about the upcoming event this Monday at Penn State, where Gavin McGinnis, who was the founder of the Proud Boys, is giving a talk. I don't know how aware the board is of the Proud Boys, but several nations, including Canada and New Zealand, have designated the Proud Boys a terrorist organization. And it's an organization that's really steeped in violence. I'm happy to share reports that was done by the Anti-Terrorism Center at West Point, and also a study that was done by the University of Maryland documenting the long history of violence in the organization. And one of the things I would like the board to be aware of and the school district to be aware of is that when folks like McGinnis come to town, there tends to be a wave of violence that happens both during the event potentially, but also that can happen in the weeks that follow the event. And so it's not just a one-off moment to have this person in our community, but if the past is any indicator of what will happen in the future, there will be a kind of reverberating effect for several weeks after the visit. And, the board should be aware, especially in the school district, amongst students and teachers, about the potentially destabilizing effect McGinnis might have in the community. Thank you.
Okay. Professor Inwood, thank you for your comments. One thing I wanted to note, as certainly with the board was, I think we're all aware from the media coverage, this event was happening. Our community has taken very proactive measures to state that we're an inclusive and welcoming community. Ferguson Township, the State College Borough, Half Moon, Patton Township, and the Center Region Council of Governments all passed resolutions affirming their commitment to inclusion as local governments. And of course, our school district has an inclusive excellence policy and passed an anti-racism resolution about 2 years ago. So we've taken measures to make clear what our values are as a community, and I think nonviolence certainly is always, a key to what we're trying to teach and uphold in the school district. So, thanks for sharing that information. So, and feel free to send us an email if you would like to. So, okay. Anyone else here who would like to make a public comment? Okay. Peter?
Yeah, if I can just add one thing, I know that this evening on the agenda of the State College Borough Council, they are voting to send a letter to President Bendapudi regarding that appearance, the appearance of the Proud Boys founder. So that's another way that our community is affirming that this evening. Obviously, that's not this board.
Right.
Okay.
And that's essentially an expression of concern
Correct.
regarding the
Yep.
impact of that.
And affirmation of unity.
Okay. Okay. Any other public comment? Okay. At this time, we have time for routine approvals. If we could get a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on routine approvals? Okay. We'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Dr. Buck,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Okay, that has passed. Moving towards action items, we have a motion to approve an MOU with the State College Area Education Association shown in attachment 6A.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Dr. Buck,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item B is a motion to approve the 2022-2023 athletics sponsorship agreements, and this is shown in attachment 6B.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item? Okay, any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Item C is a motion to approve a guaranteed admissions agreement with the Commonwealth University of Pennsylvania, shown in attachment 6C.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item?
I have one quick comment.
Sure.
I just want to say,
Fantastic.
yeah, I just wanted to, I'm sure everyone at the board table is really appreciative of,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure exactly where this generated from, obviously more likely from Commonwealth University, but just as an individual who received a very similar type of award that enabled me to go to a school that I was not going to be able to go to otherwise, these kind of grants can be really remarkable. So I just want to express a lot of appreciation for that, because I know for me, it was life-altering in my ability to go to professional school without debt. So, yeah, this is a really great thing.
Okay, Dan?
I'll certainly align myself with Amy in that department. Along the way, in my own early career in higher ed, it was really helpful to have some financial support, which otherwise would have extended my costs. It would have really tied me down for quite a period of time. So this is really valuable. One is a practical question I have about this. I see that the three locally based campuses are represented among those in the Commonwealth University. Will this apply to any other campus besides Bloomsburg, Mansfield, and Lock Haven? You know, Westchester, for example, would be a school that, no, it would just be these three campuses where the persons would be committed to attend if they decided to apply.
They've been integrated into
Right, a
one
larger
umbrella
system. That's
school,
why-
so I think it's one program for
Okay.
all of their facilities.
So does it apply to Westchester then?
No.
No, okay, just these three. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Okay, any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item D is a motion to accept the bids for Mount Nittany Elementary's large group instruction space renovations, and this is shown in attachment 6D.
So moved.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Okay, we'll have or any public comment? Then we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes. Item E is a motion to accept the bids for the Mount Nittany Middle School envelope remediation as shown in attachment 6E.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that has been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item? Okay. I don't have any questions, but just thank you again to Mr. Fisher for the clarity of these memos and like being able to show the chart with all the deferred maintenance and where we are in terms of working through that and the costs and estimates for future costs is really helpful. So for anyone in the public who's interested in better understanding these items. So,
I think Laurel has a question
Okay.
online.
Laurel?
Yeah, echoing what Amber just said about the clarity of the memo, and I'm wondering if you have any idea on why this came in at such a relatively lower price than we anticipated.
I think because we developed a base bid, but then we got itemized pricing for any work that might rear its ugly head after they kind of get into it. So we have a nice clear scope of work for our base, but then arrived at unit pricing for everything after that. Just in case we find things, we'll know what the cost will be per unit. So
That's great. And it's nice to see several bidders also on these projects.
it was, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. And item F is a motion to accept the bids for North HVAC/boilers as shown in attachment 6F.
So moved.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Okay, any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Okay, item G is a motion to approve the purchase of Project Lead the Way robotic arm kits as shown in attachment 6G.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Great. Good, that brings us to the end of our action items, and moving on to information discussion. Our first item is the physical plant and north building renovation update shown in attachment 7A, and we'll have Randy Brown and Mike Fisher here to provide us with an update. I think 7:30 is about the earliest we've ever gotten to info discussion.
No kidding.
Anytime recently, so.
Just check my watch. Is it really? You sure
I
it's
was
not
thinking
9:30?
about making a comment, but then I decided. I hadn't gotten my 3 hours worth of work done yet.
I was going to say, if you're ready to come up and give the update.
So we just wanted to make a presentation and to the full board after conversation at the last facilities meeting to provide some more clarity to expectations, especially after the vote at the last board meeting where one of the projects was voted to follow LEED certification and the other was not. So I think that the information that Mr. Fisher has put together is very clear and concise, but if there are any questions, don't hesitate to ask. That's what we're here for. And I hope that the project timeline for the facilities project, it brings some clarity also for the full board as well as for board members who had taken part in the committee meeting agenda.
Yep.
And once we have more information, obviously we'll share it about the North CTC renovation, and then we can continue to provide project updates as time goes on. And as Mr. Johnson mentioned earlier, there will be a meeting next Tuesday. 25th.
25th.
Yes, next Tuesday, the 25th, allowing for public input regarding the physical plant structure. And then there'll be another one prior to your second meeting in November. Forgive me, I don't remember the exact date, but we tried to just couple it up in case board members wanted to attend as well.
Okay. Questions? Peter?
Yeah. Is this on? Yeah. Well, first, thanks so much for the chart and all of that. It's just really great to see. I guess I have one other comment and then a question. So one of the comments is that I'm heartened to see folks from Invinity and Seven Group as part of this planning team because of their experience, obviously, in green building. So that's awesome. Then the other is, in the initial kickoff meeting, were there any discussions about like a net zero building?
There was not.
Okay. I raise that now because during our discussion regarding the solar power purchase agreement, part of what we had discussed was ongoing, so this is a new facility, but renovations and facilities in order to make them more efficient so that we can avoid external electricity purchases, right? And so not adding to that electricity bill. Obviously, a new physical plant building is, I mean, it's going to be connected to the grid, et cetera, et cetera. And so pursuit of something like net zero, so, which would require on-site renewable energy, right? Would avoid the purchases from, or not completely avoid the purchases from the grid, but reduce them, balance them out, however you want to say that. So I guess I would just like put that in now while we're right at the very beginning, and I know that we have these upcoming meetings. Mr. Johnson referred to one for the public, and there are others that are on this Gantt chart. So, but I just want to put that here.
I can tell you that solar was discussed as well as geothermal at that meeting.
Okay.
Thanks.
So in order to further explore geothermal, does that require some exploratory drilling?
There are federal funds available
Okay.
for geothermal, so we are examining that and the benefits and the pros and cons of
Okay.
each. There are other very efficient alternatives to geothermal that are much less costly.
Right.
So we're taking a look at what funding is available for efficient HVAC, and then once kind of our investigation is done, we can report out on that.
Okay, thanks. I couldn't remember if, like, when we were doing some of the planning for the larger high school project, didn't they do some boring to explore geothermal and found the site was not conducive? That was my memory, but I wasn't sure if that was just on the south side or how big of an area that was relevant to.
I remember it being done, but I don't remember which side of the street or both.
Yeah, so we should probably just, see what turned up from that.
So those I can tell you that those projects would be very different in the number of wells.
I
So,
see.
Right, so, a building this size might take 10 to 12 wells, whereas the high school may have taken 500. Right, so
okay.
that could be part of it.
Right, okay. Good to know. Okay.
So if I could ask a question and put Mr. Fisher on the spot, I'll do so anyways. Do you, Mr. Buck's question, Dr. Buck's question of net zero building, I guess, how does that fall in line with the attaining following lead standards that we are pursuing? Or do you believe that if that is the goal of the board, that we need further direction beyond that, beyond what they provided so far?
Net zero buildings and LEED certification are very much related, but two entirely different things.
Okay.
Our net zero is really looking at our energy use and energy use alone, whereas the LEED is really based highly on sustainability practices. So how very, very related, but very different.
So you gave information, but I don't feel that you answered my question. Do you believe that you need direction if the board wishes to attain net zero versus just attempting to achieve that through silver LEED?
Yes, so
standards?
we right now, our goal is, from direction of the board, is to erect a building that is built to, at a minimum, LEED Silver standards. That does not make the building a net zero building.
Right.
If the board wishes to go to a net zero building, then yes, we will need guidance on that.
Just want to make it very clear
Yeah.
to everyone in the room and watching.
And clearly, we don't have enough information to make, that's a topic for further discussion if we want to explore that.
Understood.
Yeah.
I just trying to provide clarity.
Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, sure. Net zero, a net zero building would likely max out that energy or get close to maxing out the energy part of the 5 areas in the LEED system, and it is one of the largest in the point gathering in the point system. And then were we to only play with we're going to go for a low LEED silver, things like stormwater infrastructure, which I would not want to, I don't want to compromise on anything, but that's because it's me. I'm not 9 people, I'm 1, as Randy knows. that is a way to drive point achievement on that piece of the portfolio of the LEED scorecard. And
I wasn't necessarily asking a scorecard question as much as I was also asking, does Mike feel that he needs additional direction yet?
got it.
Although,
But that, clarifying the relationship between the lead process. and-
Sure.
Yeah.
And could this be a topic of discussion for the Facilities Committee?
It will never get off that agenda.
As long as I'm a chairperson.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that it's our last meeting I thought was very productive, and we'll have as much fun as we can. And if it's net zero, it's net zero. If it's not, it's not. At least we've had a good discussion about it. You know.
Just
Yeah.
given some of the discussion we've had, Mr. Johnson and I have had about the role of committees and versus the full board, there's advantage to having the guidance that's gathered from a discussion in committee that can inform the full board about this kind of question. So, and I think it's a great ideal to try to achieve, but we need more details and more discussion probably at the ground level about this kind of stuff.
Oh, much more.
Yeah, right.
Much more research, yeah,
Right.
to understand.
So
What we're
Dan, it
talking
sounds like you're proposing that go on the facilities agenda.
However it's decided by the administration and by the committee chair, I am in support of whatever they decide.
Okay.
I think it's important to note as well that we could build the building to LEED Silver standards, and then as a phase two, without added extra cost, without the economies of scale, actually make the building a net zero building by adding something like solar after the fact. Plan for it when you put the building up, and add solar later to create that net zero building. So that's certainly possible as well.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess one of the questions I had, and this probably, it doesn't need to be answered, but just, it's more of a rhetorical question. If the board is interested in going beyond LEED Silver, I think we should talk about if we want to require something beyond LEED Silver, what is it going to require in terms of the design process? Like where would we get those points? What is the most impactful way to get to improve the performance of the building? And it seems like, because we know that there's like considerable infrastructure money flowing from the federal government to the local level now, it might be, just like when we did our elementary schools, we were able to take advantage of significant grant money to increase the sustainability and performance of those schools. Maybe this is another moment where there's, funding available for that sort of upgrade that would save the district money. Peter?
Yeah, so with the Inflation Reduction Act, for example, the rules are just starting to be written for how that money is going to be distributed, and that's not going to be out until next year. I mean,
Okay.
the EPA, I was on a discussion with someone from EPA who's starting to get direction for how they're able to internally direct money for just program support, and from there it's going, it's months until we're going to have clarity on that. Some of these other bills, there is stuff, but
Like the infrastructure bill that passed
Exactly,
earlier.
right.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
If the regulations that underlie education are any example, it would be at least a year before we'd even see proposed regulations, let alone finalized regulations, if that's any example for the pace at which these processes work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as I said, there's money available now that's out there that has direction, and that's what we're looking at right now. If we find that it's, the juice is worth the squeeze on something that's maybe costs quite a bit more, but it's offset, and it gets us better efficiency, if we come back and say that, yeah, we look at the point system, it's in the Gantt chart of kind of when that process is going to take place, where we're going to sit down and we say, okay, what are we going to tackle?
Right.
If we can get up to lead gold or lead platinum cost effectively, then that's what we'll do.
thank you.
Okay. Other questions or discussion?
I just want to acknowledge and thank you for including those most directly impacted by the design of this facility, by including the representatives of the Wright program and also the virtual academy. I can speak more to the Wright program than I can to the Virtual Academy, but the floor plan for that would need to involve enough spaces for them to break out groups of students and the kinds of programs and support they're providing into different sections, if you will, or different rooms, essentially. They'd be large enough to serve for therapeutic purposes or individualized instruction, whatever it happens to be. I'm glad you're involving those who will be living in that space to be participating in the design of this. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. All right. Anything else on this memo? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, Laurel, did you have a question? Thought I heard her. Okay. So then moving on to item B is the 2021-2022 preliminary financials update. This is shown on attachment 7B, and we have Donna Watson joining Randy Brown at the table to go over this memo with us.
Okay, thank you. We prepared or presented this to prepare the Finance Committee members with this information last week in committee, and had a very fruitful conversation. At that time, we got some really good feedback to provide some additional information and interpretation for you for this meeting. So we wanted to share that, and I appreciated their time that they provided. So we'll start with slide 3, Donna. She's going to drive for us tonight. Vanessa, you're not getting it? Okay. All right. So this slide, hold on a second. I don't understand. Let me go back here. As our normal practices, we always do a budget comparison with the most recent information that we had provided. So in this case, that would be going back to our projection that was presented at the time of the budget in June. I'm going to fly through these first couple slides because since we are at the end of the fiscal year, there is much more imperative information to share with you. But I just wanted to make sure that we follow our practice. Compared to budget, our revenues were about $4.7 million more. That is considerable dollars, but when we look at percentage of budget, given that our budget is 170 excess of $175 million, it is only 2% of the total budget.
Right?
Yes, compared to projection, excuse me. Then this slide, where we put the total revenue here by local, state, and revenue source, but we also compare the lines that have variances of $100,000 or more, and we'll speak to those when we look at comparisons to original budget as well. One slide here that I did want to make note on is earned income tax, and there is a large increase here, and that increase is accented by the fact that there was a decrease in this revenue line last year, actually the last 2 years, but a most notable decrease in the prior fiscal year. Interim real estate tax is one that we wanted to highlight as well. That is, we've been seeing a progressive increase, and there was a significant variation there from our expectations and budget, and that was based upon we didn't know where the economy was going. And again, this is a line, though, that we don't know where it will be. It's very dependent on how the new construction is going in the area. So comparing actual expenses to projections, we were about $3.3 million lower than expected, and that's only about 2%. So again, putting that in perspective of $165 million projection. And we've notated here, again, the differences on some of our various expenses, but we'll talk about these in greater detail when we compare to actual expenses to original budget. So moving on, The revenue variance is much greater at 8.4 million or 5%. But again, we are going to talk about today where some of these differences are and what their sources are and how they impact our budget and how repetitive they are. So on the local side, current real estate is up due to better collections and assessed value. Assessed value in this case is increased because more properties were added, as well as fewer declines due to appeals. If you remember back a year or two ago, we had quite a number of assessment appeals, and we just didn't have a lot of certainty where they would come in, and we had many fewer assessment appeals settled with a reduction than we had expected. Earned income was already discussed. It's up by a pretty sizable amount. Transfer tax, again, another difficult item to project, is up again, and it's not always consistent. Interim real estate tax has already been discussed. Then tuition was down due to SEAL not being able to run like normal. Under the state revenue sources, basic education subsidy was up due to the state budget being settled after the district budget was approved. Bond reimbursements are up. Bond reimbursements are the reimbursement that we receive through the PlanCom process. So as we borrow money to incur debt to provide us resources to pay for a building project, then the PlanCom process repays that reimbursement through our debt service payments. And so each year we budget what we expect to get for all of our projects. For the high school and elementary projects, we needed to do some final accounting documentation and reporting to PDE. That process has begun, and we now know how much we are expected to get. And so we're up about 2.7 million. Of that 2.7 million, about 2 million is from fiscal years prior to last year, prior to 21-22. So, am I correct on that? No, it's 2.7.
About 2.7.
2.7, I'm sorry. As I said that, I did not, yeah, so it's a retro amount of 2.7. Thank you, Donna. In this current year, 22-23's budget, if we look at that line item, there is a dollar amount for that amount. So we should not have a variance moving forward. In the past, we had a variance because we had it in our budget, but we had not received it. So just trying to explain all of that. But again, this is one-time money, and it's not going to be ongoing. And then federal revenue is down primarily because some of our ESSER expenses were not at the budgeted level. And fortunately, we can carry that money over to actually the next fiscal year, which is this year, 22-23. Looking at, next slide, is actual expenses compared to original budget. We are down about 4.1 million or 2.5%. And the largest differences here are actually, if you'll note, salaries were pretty close. And that's a pretty amazing feat on $75 million worth of budget. Health insurance is down 2.9 million, and that is two components. One, we were budgeting based upon a fully insured plan, which is what we had before. But after the budget was created, or maybe as the budget was created, we moved to a self-funded plan. So our self-funded experience was lower than what we had budgeted. In addition, because it was budgeted as a fully insured plan, there was also money there for our healthcare reserve. And healthcare reserve, keep in mind, with a self-funded plan, our costs will vary much more greatly based upon actual expenses for those covered under our health insurance plan. And so we'll talk about building a healthcare reserve a little bit later in this presentation. So several other expense categories were lower than normal, primarily due to economic and budgetary uncertainty. Part of which we didn't spend intentionally, as well as some items we weren't able to spend because of logistics and the economy. As we return to a more normal environment, we cannot expect these savings to continue. The purchase property services category is higher due to physical plant maintenance that we incurred due to a backlog from previous years. The deferred maintenance line, however, which is a different line, shows an increase because that is due to, we're recommending that we return that line to a pre-COVID level. We did not fund that line fully in 22.
2021, and then we were
2021, and then we were projecting to decrease in 21-22, and now we're proposing that we increase that because of our fiscal results. My years are getting away from me here. And contingency was not needed, fortunately, this year, so therefore that variance as well. As we'll talk about a little bit later, we are recommending a transfer to capital reserve, which aids to make up for no transfer in 2021. The remaining available fund balance will be used to create the health insurance reserve for excess expenses. Our actuaries recommend a 3 to 6 month fund, a fund that amounts to 3 to 6 months of our expenses. Although they highly recommend going to the higher end of that when possible. We expected that could take several years to commit to fund, but because of our finances this year, we would recommend fully funding that, and then that allows to not have to worry about it in future years and build that into our expenditure budget. So this is a summary of our financial results, starting with revenue, comparing actual to original and variance, and then expenses, and then our proposed cap reserve transfer, as well as commitments to fund balance, and then showing you the change in unassigned fund balance. So if we look at our unassigned fund balance, and we start again with our revenue at 177 and change, we look at our expenses before cap reserve and fund balance commitments. We had available fund balance of $15 million. We are proposing a transfer to capital reserve of $6.9 million, healthcare insurance reserve of $7.2, and that shows that's $14,160,000, $14,160,000, leaving an available fund balance of $932,922. Our change in non-spendable and enterprise accounts is $226, so that allows for a total change in unassigned fund balance of $1.1 million, taking us to $13.4 million, which is 7.2 of our expenses. This slide details the available fund balance. So where did this $15 million come from? I talked about it in different perspectives, comparing our actual results to budget. Breaking it down, we had about $2.6 million in additional real estate revenue that coming from assessed value growth, lower assessment appeals, and higher collection rate. Earned income tax was 1.9 higher. Realty transfer was $700,000 higher. Interim real estate was $1 million. Basic ed was $632,000, and bond reimbursements $2.7. Health insurance was $2.9, and contingency of $900,000 was not used. Again, I can't stress enough, but several of these items are definitely not recurring. Several of them have a recurring impact. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that of that $15 million, we cannot expect, in large part, these items to be have such variances in future years as we did in this year. Doing what we call a roll forward of our fund balance, starting with all of the fund balance categories in the general fund from June 30 of 2021, and then our proposed additions or activities, and then the balance at June 30, 2022 compared to our original budget. Again, I would preface here that when we look at our general fund balance, we're going to also, when we're looking at that in our future year projections, we're going to exclude the health insurance allocation or commitment, because we believe that that amount, especially until we get future, have more years under our belt to understand what our health care really is going to look like, we need to look at that as non-spendable. The proposed board resolution then, that is in our next slide, is including the transfer to capital reserve of 6.9 million, and then health insurance of commitment of 7.2. No changes to the PSERS and the revenue shortfall allocations. So this is our board resolution that was scheduled to come to you tonight. However, based upon direction from the committee, we felt that this was a lot of information, that we should have an information discussion item and then bring this to you at your next meeting in November. Other uses of fund balance. A common question when we have a positive fund balance at the end of a year is, what can we do to spend this money other than your recommendations? And so, again, just some words of caution. We would suggest avoiding recurring expenses, since the available fund balance is not always recurring, and projections continue to show higher expense than revenue, even with some of our updated revenue projections based upon this new information. And we also have an ongoing commitment from the administration, as we have done in prior years, to evaluate our budget to provide opportunities for student needs, being mindful that expenses are still estimated to exceed, again, to be in excess of updated revenue projections. There was a couple different questions at committee, and the board members can choose to bring those up. But again, we believe that our budget has a lot of opportunities for our students. We continue to talk to our students and our faculty about different things to fund from our budget, and we'll continue to do that. As far as capital items, we're making some good headway, and as we've committed, especially when we are talking about an exterior project or a certain type of project, we're looking at ways to continue to improve our accessibility, and we'll do that we hope to do that through our regular capital budget. Our multi-year projections, for revenue expenses have been updated. They've been attached to the memo here this evening. I don't plan to go through them line by line, but they are the lines where we have made changes have been highlighted for you, as is our common practice, so that if you want to flip through and really get a quick understanding, at least from a global perspective, you can do that. Our expenses are still expected to exceed revenue in many of the out years. Our budget development discussion will follow this discussion item. And our fund balance, we do have updated charts for you. This first chart is it is the exact one from June of 2022, which was created probably in the April-May timeframe in our budget development for this current year. And then on the next slide, we have, this slide shows our updated fund balance projections, taking into account not only the 21-22 results and pushing those impacts forward into future years, but also various tax rate increases that could be possibilities, not proposed, but could be possibilities for 2023-24. And the three that we've shared with you are 0, the 2%, which is typically our average that we use in our projections, and 4.1%, which is the Act 1 index. Obviously, the one that has the best results would be the Act 1 index. The next one is 2%, that does show a negative fund balance, and then the next one, the lowest one, or lowest two, would be the projection in the 2022-23 budget, and the 0 tax rate, or the net change of 0 in the tax rate. Just following up on capital projects, we shared with Finance Committee that a funding analysis of anticipated capital projects will be presented in November of '22, just in next month. This does include our deferred maintenance, which is in our capital projects budget. This does include the North project, the physical plant building, and the Mount Nittany LGI renovations. Future items that would be included in our capital projects, expenses would be any, talking about attendance area and facilities analysis outcomes, which are, obviously yet to be known, playgrounds, athletic fields, and Memorial Field turf. Long-term, obviously, is Park Forest Middle School and district-wide facilities master plan. Just to review, in case anybody needs a review, and maybe there's someone new tuning in to this meeting, the Capital Reserve Fund, the purpose is for an intentional set-aside of fund balance to offset and/or fund future capital project costs. The PDE guidance is to transfers to capital reserve are not allowed when general fund are only allowed when when the general fund has access, not allowed, only allowed, excuse me. We will correct that and repost tomorrow. Multi-year projections show expense greater than revenue. Therefore, we should not budget a transfer. If an excess exists at a end of a fiscal year, then a transfer can be completed. So that's why we are, if the proposed transfer is completed, the 21-22 ending balance in the Capital Reserve Fund would be approximately $62 million. Future projects that have some earmarked dollars in that fund at this point in time would be a middle school, Park Forest Middle School, athletics and playgrounds, and physical plant building. And then this is a timeline that you've seen before that is related to all of the meeting dates and related to closing out our year and bringing the audit forward and making all of our year-end disclosures and reporting. That's all we have. That was a pile of information, I realize, and the memo has a lot of information. This information, I tried to detail the presentation right line, section by section from the memo. So be happy to entertain any questions or comments, or I'm sure board members from Finance Committee would also like to provide some conversation from that meeting.
Sure. Jackie?
Thanks for your work. I have a really boring question, and I'm not an accountant at all, so it might not make any sense. So bear with me here. So the BEF funding increased this year, but we don't expect to see a variance on that ever because we don't expect them to increase it year over year. So far, making sense? Okay, but that new and improved BEF number goes into our budget for the next year.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Nope,
I don't know if that made sense to anyone else.
Totally does. Yeah,
Yes,
good question.
you're good.
Thank you.
I think that probably several have asked it at one point in time prior to you asking, so,
Because the challenge is that we have to pass our budget before the state's required to pass theirs.
right.
So we have to work with an estimate.
Yeah,
Yep.
I just want to make sure I was understanding variance and
That's,
so thank you.
There wouldn't be a variant if, in the case where the district passed a budget before the state, and then the district did a budget amendment, but generally the dollar amount is not significant compared to the size of our budget.
Yes.
And so we don't even recommend that action be taken because we don't feel that it's necessary.
Got it. Thank you.
Dan?
Just, and I feel less than adequate bringing this up for the first time now. I should have attended the Finance and Audit Committee, which would be a better opportunity for this. But in terms of looking at this, however you want to call it, rainy day fund or contingency fund for the health insurance budget, as a percentage, you said it's the advice we've been receiving is to be at a certain percentage of the total cost of the
6 months of an annual cost.
6 months of an annual cost. Okay. And that the amount that's in this that you just presented represents that amount for this particular budget year. Okay. All right then, and that'll be every year. We'll come back to that again for that particular item. So.
Well, We will evaluate and make a recommendation on whether that, once a commitment is made, it's there until the board changes that commitment.
Okay.
Am I correct on it?
Correct.
Right.
So we wouldn't you wouldn't, as a board, need to change that commitment unless we felt that there was a recommendation or you wanted to make a change on your own.
And it'll depend upon our experience. So in a given year, if we have to draw into that, that might increase the likelihood we'll have to add to it
That's
more the following year.
And as, it depends also what our expected costs are
Right.
for the next year based upon our experience, most recent experience, whether if even if we don't have to dip into it, even if our expenses are expected to increase, we need to evaluate how much the different net change year over year is.
We're anticipating more exposure, so to
Correct.
speak. So if the costs of
Yes.
certain procedures.
You
or
said that
diagnosis
much better
go-
than I did.
Okay,
Thank you, Dan.
great, thanks. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else over here? Questions? Okay. Laurel?
Thanks. I just could not look through my old records very well here. And it seems to me that one year, maybe, I think it was before the pandemic, we got a list towards the end of the year, because this has come up before when we've had excess at the end of the year over what we had projected. And there was a list of sort of things that the administration had given the go-ahead to and things that were requested, but were seen to be slightly lower priority. And so were not included in the budget. I can't remember what year that was, but is there a document, even if it wasn't actually presented to the board like that for this past year, that might be things that really were high priority but not highest, given that we budget very conservatively?
So in talking with Bob O'Donnell, there's no list to my knowledge, or that he had, other than facilities kind of things that we are already pretty much taken care of.
Yeah, I think we were so conservative, and we have been the last couple of years because no one's known what's going to happen. But in the coming year, I'd like to see that reappear so that if we continue to run into this, there may be some things that come off of that list if we are fortunate enough to have some flexibility, some unexpected flexibility. I understand last year were particularly challenging to forecast, and the things we heard from Gretchen earlier only highlight that it may not get better anytime soon. But, okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, Laurel, I had asked that in committee as well, anticipating this question generally comes up every year
Yep.
that we have this kind of surplus that, are there particularly one-time expenses, not necessarily recurring expenses, that we would want to consider, so.
I think if I could just add quickly that the other thing to consider is that we knew that the students as well as the faculty, they're still coming off the pandemic. And so
Right.
there's so many things that are required. We didn't even necessarily go delving with our administration as deep as we sometimes do because of not having the capacity to take on some new things this year.
Gretchen?
Yeah, I was just going to add quickly that, the list that Laurel's asking about, it's really interesting because, as I said in my COG report, I attended the budget meeting today, for example, and that's exactly what they were doing. So the budget had come to the municipalities 8% higher than they wanted, so they went back to the heads and said, okay, give us lists of your items and the priority, and then they voted on each one. And it just seems so transparent. I've never seen anything like that here. And then apparently there is no list here in SCAS. It's just interesting, seeing the because it's always been a bit of a mystery to me in SCASD, and then today when I went to that budget meeting, it was also clear. So anyway, Laurel, I understand what you're asking about with the list.
And I'll just affirm this, the agreement with Laurel's comments, because it fits with my experience as well. The fact there was one year where I was unwilling to approve the amended budget based on the fact that we had a pretty substantial surplus at the end, and we didn't direct any of it towards the list of unmet needs. But that was a different time, and I developed a lot of respect for the kinds of work that Randy does in terms of anticipating all eventualities, including the downturn the last several years. And as Laurel mentioned, I'm not this year ready to consider or looking again at our unmet needs, though we will need to be looking at such a list or some process in the future that gives us this opportunity when we have good news such as we're having now about any additional funds that are available.
Amy?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, Gretchen, so a lot of what you're mentioning, lists and things, are largely one-time costs, yes? Like purchasing equipment, as opposed to creating positions?
Right.
Would that be accurate? No. Okay. So I guess, yeah, I'm happy to see lists and I'm all for transparency. I think the challenge that we sometimes face is that such a high percentage of the things that we add are recurring cost items in the school district, in terms of staff and positions.
Right,
things
so there
like
could be
that.
2 lists.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. I'm just commenting for the general public to understand that because like 80% or more of our costs are people costs that tend to be ongoing, that bucket could be somewhat smaller. That's all.
Yeah, and I can offer an example of an unmet need that Kim has come out recently in some public discussions that have occurred, and that is some hardware for the school that provides for greater access to the new high school.
Yeah.
That's been sitting,
I'm
and
not making a
you've advocated for
counter-argument,
that
I'm
as
just
well.
trying to clarify.
But I'm just offering an example of the kind of thing we're talking about that could be a one-time allocation based on a well-identified need.
So I'd asked about that specifically in the Finance Committee, and that can come out of, like, that would be a capital expenditure. So capital reserve, if we were to transfer funds to capital reserve, anything for, physical accessibility needs.
Could be rolled right
pertaining
into
to-
that.
Exactly.
Right.
Good
yeah.
news, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's, the question about what's being said no to, I think is what has come up
You bet.
year over year. so.
And over the past few years, we have had a lot of funds from ESSER and a number of different, so we haven't had to create lists because we've had the extra funding to accomplish a lot of the things that we would normally be asking for or have a list for.
And in the budget process also outlined a lot of the new additions, whether it was positions or not, which I think most of them were this year. But there was already provided a list of things that were budget adds. So we don't have things that we're trying, that we're not providing, I don't think.
I think this comes back to the question of what were the high priority things we said no to, right? And maybe this past year there were not high priority things we said no to because we had ESSER funds that made those things possible. But to have potentially a process in the future where we have some of that documented so that when we get to this juncture, it's something to refer to.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have that in the future as we get back to normal as far as the school district.
And the way budgeting occurs with,
Yeah.
we won't have
Yeah.
the ESSER funds
Oh, the
moving
requests
forward.
will come in.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it also goes back to some of the questions that, like I know Laurel has asked in the past about the actual process of how budget requests get from the classroom to the school to the district level.
And one of the things that, which has become clearer to me over the 6 or 7 years that I've been around, has been the fact that the finance side and the program side are interwoven. The culture, climate, and learning and finance and audit we're so intertwined, So in terms of identifying needs and meeting those needs, those committees are on both sides of that equation, basically.
Peter?
Yeah, I guess I just want to make a brief observation based on my experience in municipal government and in the COG. And I think one of the issues that I see when we look at what we're talking about, these
Right.
lists and this thing versus that thing, is that, so for example, the Ferguson Township budget was $19 million. It was very small. The COG's budget, compared to the the district's budget and the complexity of the organization is very small. And so the number of requests before us and the number of line items that go through Randy's office is just vastly higher. Like, or
Absolutely.
it's sort of like, it's probably orders of magnitude, bigger. And I hope I just used orders of magnitude wrong or right.
You did, totally.
I used it right.
Totally.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just like, and the complexity makes some of this, I think, a little bit harder. And I'm not saying that to say yes or no to anything, just that the process for getting to it and keeping track of everything is just more complicated and protracted. And that's all. Patience, I guess. Patience is the thing that I hope that we can have in whatever it is, because it might be harder to get an answer just because of the amount of stuff people have to do.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So the next item is the 23-24 budget update, or the budget development update, and that's in attachment 7C. So we will move on to that memo.
So the largest items to share here have already been shared. The Act 1 index is 4.1 million. I'm sorry, 4.1%, excuse me. For this year, it was 3.4%. We've attached for you a timeline of events related to the 23-24 budget process. This has many more details than are necessary for your knowledge, probably. What we typically show is a more scaled-down version based upon board action and administrative steps and reporting out to you through board and committee. And we just haven't had a chance to get that updated, but we will do that in the very near future, and we'll have many conversations about the budget development process. Just the one thing that we did share in Finance Committee last week is that, and I don't think I can emphasize this enough, is that, as someone else shared earlier, our salaries and benefits are 80% of our budget. And that's our people. And so where do we spend our dollars on people? From a salary and benefits perspective is where we believe we need to spend the vast majority of our time this year. And that's, that's just having that focus. That being said, for those of you who don't attend Finance Committee regularly, the question about clubs, activities, intramurals, and athletics is also very significantly discussed in that, and we started presenting some information at the last meeting, and we will continue to do so. We suspect that will take us through much of the budget development process, but we will be including that, and a large part of that is also people cost for the advisors and the coaches and that type of thing. So that's where we would like to spend the majority of our focus this year. As well as putting a lot of emphasis on our capital needs and capital planning, using capital reserve, and preparing for that ultimate Park Forest Middle School project that, in my head, I kept on having a 2027 date for, but that wasn't for planning and development, that was for potentially construction. And so 24 is going to be here before we know it. So my guess is that in the 23-24 school year, we could be, once we get the attendance area and facilities assessment done, we could start beginning talk about a process and a district-wide master plan, which is required, and those types of things. So it will be a multi-year effort, because it will have to look at programming, it will have to look at size, it will have to look at location, it will have to look at all of those things. So for those of you that I've seen I haven't seen, my wife has told me on Facebook and social media that people are asking about that. It is coming, and
Community is eager.
Yes, I don't doubt that. At least a portion of the community is very eager, absolutely.
Yeah.
Probably the northern side of the district. But that, to me, and for the work that we have to do, that's all connected together. Donna, is there anything that I'm forgetting tonight?
think so.
I apologize that I haven't let you do
No,
more talking.
you're great. You're great.
Okay. Questions? Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
I just want to thank you both and thank Randy as the leader of the team for this review. I've been through this a number of times, and every year I get to see more with greater clarity the processes involved. I want to just express my appreciation for your work in this area.
Well, Donna's just excited that this is her last one.
No.
Said that without tears.
Oh, well, thank you. Okay, so Peter, do you have update from F&G?
Yeah, I do. So I think we talked about the building earlier, so the physical plant building. So I don't think that we need to cover really anything more about that. The boundary assessment. Mr. Brown and Ms. Yoder had worked with the consultant to complete a timeline that will include the steps in the process, the results in the enrollment projections, and a facility analysis. Let me see, demographically speaking, optional student assignments might be affected going forward, and an educational needs-based assignments should not be affected. So in their discussion with Crabtree Rohrbaugh, it's surrounded including stakeholder input and the policy committee, goals and functions that could change as more is learned. And then I think that's really about it. We had a brief discussion about the solar power purchase agreement working group, and then the need probably to dive more into what the renewable energy credits and renewable energy certificates, what that would entail, because if we don't retain the renewable energy certificates from the solar purchase, assuming that we signed the thing. So should it be signed, what would we do with those renewable energy certificates? And that's something that the board.
How do we make a decision on that?
How do we make that decision, and what would that decision entail? And is it a thing that can be changed every few years and whatnot? So we're just going to have to dive into that more on that committee.
Sounds
Okay.
good. Deb is not here to do finance. Gretchen, you were going to do the finance update, though. Right?
Yeah, Randy kind of did it.
Yeah,
So
it's pretty
thank you,
much
Randy.
covered,
Yeah, the
yeah.
only thing it wasn't covered was the student activity and clubs. And if you read the agenda memo, you'll see everything you need to know, so.
All right. So we have 2 meetings tomorrow here in this room at 11 and 1:30, Culture, Climate, and Learning, and then Policy Development. So moving on to board reports. Dan, Central Intermediate Unit.
An update from the IU in a recent communication from the Intermediate Unit. They announced a partnership between the Central Intermediate Unit and the Pennsylvania Department of Health to provide COVID-19 testing within Center County. The testing program had its first date on Tuesday, September the 13th. The testing is free to the general public. It's available from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Tuesdays through Saturdays, and it's located in the basically in the parking lot outside of the Central Intermediate Unit offices, which are located at 60 Decibel Road. And to kind of, it can be a little bit tricky to find in terms of knowing what you're looking for, but it basically is off to the right. It's I should say it's opposite the Nittany Mall on the side with McDonald's. And if you enter along that the road to Pleasant Gap, but turn right at the light across from the mall, and you're on Decibel Road, and the testing site will be in the parking lot off to your right, maybe 200 yards up that road. But it's free 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and it'll be available from now through July 31st of 2023.
Great.
So just want to make that known to us and also as well to the community as well, at no cost to those. And it's for anyone. It's not just students. It's for people of all ages to participate as needed.
Great. Thank you. Okay, SCASD Ed Foundation report, that's me. So the foundation board is busy evaluating grant applications. There's been a process for district staff to apply for grants for various innovative programs and activities with students, so they're in the process of evaluating those. And my understanding is we had a really good improvement in the number of applications, which is great. And we also have an upcoming donor appreciation event that they're planning. CTC Local Advisory Committee, Carlene?
Our first meeting is on the 25th of this,
Okay.
so we haven't had a meeting yet.
Great. Okay. Athletics liaison report. I was not able to make it to the last athletics CAC. Were you
It
able
was
to do that?
interesting. We met on September 20th, and we spoke about a lot of things. The first was about the sportsmanship and unity pledge, which we say in the beginning of a lot of our sporting events, where we take one of our team person and we take the opposition team member, and then they read the pledge together. And so far, they think that the outcome has been really positive, because even some of the coaches from the other team had said that they are very impressed with our students with us. So we're pretty happy about that. And also another reason that this is going well is because we have student leaders that we meet with, and we exchange ideas and implement things. So that is also positive. We also talk about attendance that has been really high. When we had the meeting, we had 2 varsity football teams that had played. And the first game that we had 2,500 people in attendance. The second game was against Hollidaysburg, and we had 3,100 people. And we have to know that the capacity of Memorial Field is 3,200. So we were really close to capacity. So I wanted to know, why do we think that was a reason for all this? And student participation has really increased. The weather was really good before. And I think also because of post-COVID, people want to get out, and I think people know more or less an idea of how to protect themselves. So we talked about moving different sections around in Memorial Fields. And the high school section, due to interest, they're going to be fusing with the marching band and cheerleaders. And we're going to move some of the middle school area to away from the concession where they used to be. So we're going to move some things around. And we're looking at alternative for live stream. And also we talked about, about the student. This is something that we haven't implemented, but we may, because some of the parents kind of drop off their kids and they leave. And then we're kind of responsible because it's like a school event.
Right.
And so if this continues, we may make it mandatory that parents stay with their child.
For middle school or high
For
school?
middle school.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that we don't want to impose until they send out memos about this.
Yes, we've been
but-
getting reminders from principals to please
Yeah, but if this
accompany
continues.
your
it'll-
children. Yeah.
And lastly, somebody wanted to know about the NIL, which is the name, image, and likeness. And according to the PIAA, we're not really supposed to discuss this with parents. So when they do ask about that, we have to give them the information, direct them to information where they could get it. But we're not really supposed to talk about that. And our next meeting is November 15th.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much. Facilities, Peter, were you able to attend the CAC for facilities?
I was not.
Okay. And I see Mike's not here, so. Oh, Gretchen, did you go?
No, and nobody did. And so I think they postponed it.
They did.
And
Oh,
now it's
okay.
going to be
17th?
soon.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. We should follow that. Okay. Was there I don't think there was a finance CAC since our last meeting, right? I don't think so. School health and safety, has that committee
I
met?
think it's early November, if I recall
Okay.
correctly.
Okay. Jackie, has there been a technology meeting? Okay. All right, so moving forward to future agenda planning, November 7th is our next full board meeting. And you can see a few of the action items. And just to remember that we need to make a decision about the fund balance resolution at that meeting. It's important that we make a decision. And with that, I will be looking for a motion to adjourn to executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. All in favor of adjourning? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, then we are adjourned.